At least 30 people have been killed and dozens wounded in a series of suicide bombings in the Afghan city of Kandahar. The Taliban says the blasts were meant as a message to NATO that the terrorists' presence in the country is strong and they're gaining new ground. And as RT's Paula Sleer reports, one of the key obstacles for the international armed forces in their fight to defeat the Taliban is failing to win over the Afghan people.
For 4 months, this has been Saeed Karim's home. 4 prison cells with 60 inmates crammed inside. The 22-year-old's waiting judgment, and if found guilty, could spend many more years here. The charges against him, commanding a Taliban unit.
The government has no evidence that I have links with the Taliban. I don't, but even if someone is a member, they won't admit it because they're afraid. The government may not even mind, and the local people think the Taliban are okay, but the police have to put them in prison to keep the foreigners happy.
But just how happy are the foreigners really? Despite working with the local Afghan security structures, in the last 6 years the Taliban's grown in many parts of the country. Operation Mustarak, launched last month, far from defeating the Taliban, simply made it go underground to resurface elsewhere. Sergeant Bertrand Fitzpatrick spends his days coordinating missions with the Afghan army, border patrol and policemen. It's his job to watch every step his foot soldiers make, and if needed, to bring in the Air Force. Sometimes it gets tricky.
We have to make sure that they are also not amongst, the enemy. Sometimes that's hard to do because the insurgents will wear the same type of clothing, and communication can be difficult at times. They have their own radio systems, and they'll talk to personnel that we have embedded with them, who will then relay that information to us.
But sometimes that information can be wrong. Corruption within the Afghan police is rampant, and many civilians still support the Taliban. They're more than happy to tip them off about what the foreigners are up to.
Countryside, the people are not cooperating. A police and an army can only be successful if the people of that nation are behind it. And if the people of a nation is not behind its own military and its own police, it's very difficult to create an effective police or military.
Brigadier General Ben Hodges, who heads up the Foreign Forces operation in southern Afghanistan, doesn't dispute this, but he says the only way to change the reality on the ground is to keep the Afghans involved and try to build a better army and police force.
First and foremost is to help train Afghan security forces. So more troops that will come here either as partners or as actual trainers, because what we really want to do is help increase the Afghan security force capability so that they can protect their own population.
But sometimes that cooperation seems futile, especially when US President Barack Obama announced he would begin withdrawing his troops by July 2011. General Stanley McChrystal later said a withdrawal would not be feasible until 2013. But, says Afghan President Hamid Karzai, his security forces will need another 5 years on top of that to be up to scratch. As the deadlines keep shifting and the relationship between both sides remains strained, America, it seems, has all the watches, but the Taliban has all the time. Paula Sleer, RT.